There's an image that comes up in Scripture over and over again to describe what it looks like to have faith. What does it look like to have faith? Looks like a tree. That's what it looks like. Psalm 1 says that those who delight in the Lord become like trees planted by streams of living water, who bear fruit in due season. This is the exact same picture that Jesus draws upon when he talks about in the Gospels how the kingdom of heaven is like a sower who goes out and sows seed. The Apostle Paul also says that disciples of Jesus are those who are rooted and grounded in love. To follow Jesus means to have his word go deep into our hearts like a seed, and that we become rooted in his love, rooted in his faithfulness. And then the fruit of his Spirit comes out as a result. And what happens when many people are rooted and grounded together? What happens when many trees grow up together? A forest. That's what happens. We are so excited to share with you this incredible story, this close-up look at some of the trees in our forest, some of the families of our church who have seen impossible situations be broken into by God and actually to become knit together in this new family, in this new forest. At Community Bible Church, we are all about making disciples who make disciples. And this beautiful story is simply one way that we've seen the Spirit moving as our forest of faith grows. Our story begins with Pam Norman. She and her husband Mark welcomed their first daughter Morgan into the world in the early 90s. A few years later, they had a second daughter, Kelsey. Everything seemed normal with Kelsey until she caught spinal meningitis, which led them to discover a deeper health concern, cerebral palsy. As a young mom, Pam experienced sorrow and pain, but eventually saw God work in her entire family.
In terms of, any kind of understand, there was none of that. And I always kind of was like, I should be in church, there was a burden about that, and tried different times the church that Mark and I got married in, but nothing ever kind of clicked. I understand why in hindsight it didn't click, so I was a natural man, I wasn't saved. So, but she invited, it was when Community Bible Church in Beaufort was meeting at the local college there, USCB, is when I went in that auditorium the first time. And then, Kelsey was we found out in November of 94, everything we were dealing with Kelsey. In turn, she actually had gotten spinal meningitis. She was really sick. She was in the ICU, and it was just kind of interesting, the fear of losing her. It was almost like God used this fear of her dying to almost prepare us for what we were going to face. I don't know if that makes any sense, you're getting ready to get some really bad news, but good news, but bad news, and I have to make her precious to you. And I look at the spinal meningitis about that, but she really wasn't progressing the way she should have. We Blue Angels come to Beaufort and they're flying over, and there's no, that should have scared a baby, or we were underneath some of their flight paths and just little things like that. So we kind of knew, and when she was in the hospital, the pediatrician wanted to do an MRI. But they tell you, she's not going to walk, she's not going to talk. That's just hard. But in that process, I'm still this way. I read a lot. I try to figure things out. I want to know why people, I don't want my suffering to be pointless, so you're just searching. And just kind of in the midst of that, it's like, and that didn't happen overnight, like Kelsey was born in 94, and we found out in April of 94, found out in November, and just, Sydney was born in June of 96, and here's, she's perfect, she's perfect, and I really, God used Kelsey to save me, but he used Sydney to restore joy in my life. That's kind of the only way that I can explain it, but it was in the midst of just that healing. Michelle invited me to Friend Day in November. Well, I guess it would have been October of 96. And I heard the gospel. And I was so mad at God, why me? I'm smart and I'm funny and I'm pretty. And I even hate to say those things out loud because it's look how great I am. But that's how I felt when I was facing what I was facing with Kelsey. But now I go, why me? Why would you entrust her to, why would you give her to me? It's such a big gift. So you go from arrogance to humility, and and I thought Kelsey was about me, but she really was. I found out I was a wretch that needed to be saved, and I think that's really oftentimes that's how God uses suffering. He uses suffering to get people's attention. This is why. This is part of the point of my suffering. He was going to show me kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, and it started with Kelsey.
So when you first were invited by Morgan, she invites you to come to church. Do you remember kind of what you were thinking? Was it, I'll come because of Morgan, or what was kind of the idea behind why would you even come that first time?
Well, I think just seeing things changing in the home, I knew there were some changes in attitudes and that sort of thing. Looking back, I see that. At the time, it was just, they're going to go to church on Sunday morning, and I'm going to have, a couple of hours just to myself, kind of, selfish that way, I guess. But, and Morgan, she had asked me about coming to church for Palm Sunday. She was going to sing in the choir, and I think she had probably asked at other times, and I just had an excuse not to come. But she's singing, it's not, you need to come hear the sermon or whatever. It's, I'm going to be on the stage kind of thing. So I joined them that day. And I don't remember the song that Morgan sang, but I do remember the sermon that Carl preached that day. And I was sitting on the edge of my seat, and I'd been in church a lot, in my younger days, and growing up, but I'd never heard the gospel before. I'm 100% sure I had never. Well, it may have been said, but I never heard it. I never had ears to hear the gospel message, and I did that day.
Now that Mark and Pam were both following Jesus, the entire Norman family began to grow in faith together. They soon moved to Florida as a young family. In Ocala, they became involved in planting a brand new church built on expository preaching and family-rich community. That same kind of church that had brought them to faith in Christ. That new church was our church, CBC Ocala, and that is a story for another day. Meanwhile, before Morgan left for college, she began working at the YMCA. God had been preparing her to be a light to those around her, starting with her coworker, Erica.
I was a lifeguard and a swim instructor, and Erica was teaching infant swim rescue lessons. So we would see each other several times a week, if not every day of the week, for a couple of hours. We would chat in between our sessions, and just really, like any work relationship, you get to know people and what they're going through, and they share the good things and also some of the bad things that they might be dealing with. And she had shared just some hard things that were going on in her marriage over time. I don't think it was just one time, it was over time. She just shared bits and pieces of it. And I definitely didn't feel equipped or exactly able to help in that situation, know what to say. I was a single college student, who hadn't really had a long-term relationship. So I definitely didn't feel like I was adequate to speak into that. But I knew that you were doing marriage classes at the Y, and so I reached out to you originally to, find out, was there availability? Is this something we could invite her to? And ultimately offered to watch Erica's kids so she could, come to the marriage class. And I remember thinking, is she going to be offended that I'm asking her? Is this going to put her on the spot? Like, I don't know anything about marriage. I don't know what the right thing is to do, but maybe this could help. And she agreed to come.
So I met Morgan by working at the Y. I was teaching swim lessons for infants at the time, and of course, while working there, kind of developed a friendship with her along the way and confided in her about some stuff that was going on in my marriage with Trevor at the time. And I actually had been going to counseling with a Christian counselor that was recommended by a friend. I wasn't going to church at the time. We hadn't found a church or anything at that point in our marriage, nor was I saved at that point either. But I had actually been going to the counselor, I think, for nearly a year, and had developed more anger and bitter in our relationship, and just felt like there wasn't any hope at that point, and didn't want to be a failure because my parents were divorced and remarried. But just, not feeling appreciated. It was challenging having 2 young children. There was drinking involved. And also just a lot of working hours and just conflict that was going on and not being able to communicate properly and that kind of thing, but just feeling like it was starting to become to a point where neither one of us were happy and really struggling at that point and didn't know where to turn. So, and then Morgan surprised me, and one afternoon I was at work and basically said, "Hey, I'm watching your kids tonight, so you and Trevor can get together and go to this class." And I said, "Really? What kind of a class?" And she said, "Well, it's through our church." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she's like, "Well, I've already signed you up and I paid for it, and I'm going to watch your kids tonight, so you have to go." So at that point, I did feel a little surprised and taken back. And of course, I shared with Trevor and felt like, well, we probably should go. She put all this effort in, and I guess the rest is history.
For her to come to me and say, "Let's do this," and I was thinking, she already told me there was no out because Morgan handled that, right? So, I was open to it.
I think it was several months after we did the Marriage by Design class when we did the counseling with you. I think it just kind of got to a point where things we were the surviving, kind of doing that surviving. And then I think there was just, I don't know, there was some stuff going on with you, I think, at work. And then just things hadn't gotten better, and just kind of came crashing down. And I got to a point where I think my breaking point, and I at that point almost wanted to be divorced. I just wanted to leave. I was so hurt and just felt like I couldn't trust him. And I remember, I think he called him. You called Mike,
Mm-hmm.
and you had asked to meet with him.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely through the Marriage by Design, it was kind of funny because at first, and we'd gone out to lunch with you and Sherry and the whole thing, and you invited us to church. And I remember saying to Erica, going, I really like them, but what happens if we go to their church and we just, it's not our thing, like we don't like it, and then that's going to be more difficult. But no, I mean, it really was God's plan all the time for us to join the church and go in that direction. So and I had a comfort level with you coming from similar backgrounds that I was comfortable giving you a call and saying, hey, we need some help.
And then we did counseling together. I don't remember how long we did or anything.
I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of sessions there because you gave us some homework that we kind of did on our own, and then things went much better. Yeah, so we got saved in 2011, baptized, and I think that for me, it just being able to, in our family, be able to ask for forgiveness and be able to work through different things was a biggie for me. We really didn't know how to handle that before. We just didn't. And raising the children was much easier, doing it from a sense of having our faith, having good people around us to speak with and bounce things off of as well, and just even finances. I mean, a big thing for us was finances and going through financial peace, and we kind of checked all the boxes, right, as new Christians, but it certainly put us on the right path and just made life a lot better. Yeah, so we're on the other side of town, and we're looking for a piece of property or for a home closer to church, closer to your work and the kids' school, and just seemed like we were constantly coming to this side of town for baseball, for everything that we were doing, and so we had probably looked at, oh my goodness, 20 plus houses and put offers in on some, and God kept shutting that door. And but what was really good about it at that time, I mean, being with our faith that we was fairly new, I guess, at the time, but we understood and we kept praying about it and knew that that God would provide the right property for us, and if it was meant to happen. And then we did. We found the right home that worked well for our family, that was right down the street
Close to
from the school, not far from church. And I worked from home at the time, so it gave me an extra space for my office. And it was kind of interesting. The first weekend we moved in, we had gone, it was Father's Day weekend?
Father's Day weekend.
And we moved in, and the first weekend, we come home and there are like police cars everywhere and all kinds of ruckus going on with our next door neighbors, and we were like, what the heck is going on here? Where did we move to? What happened? And it was pretty challenging for a while, I would say. There was good couple of years, at least, where there was a lot of activity with our next door neighbors and challenges with their children, and a lot of police activity and a lot going on. That some good teaching moments for our kids, I would say, but.
And they were good. I mean, we got to know Chris and Tim. We would chat with them, kind of more small talk than anything. And we felt like they were good people, and we were just surprised that there was just so much going on. And I know at the time they were going to church at another church in town, and just were surprised at how much was going on as, being Christians, and just, but I know after, there would be several incidents where, either we called the police or other neighbors called the police, and just, domestic type stuff was going on, drugs, and just we weren't used to that. I mean, our kids were not used to that, and it was pretty scary at times. And of course, we had made the transition to start homeschooling our kids, so I was home a lot more and seeing and witnessing a lot more stuff going on, and just trying to put up safe boundaries. But at the same time, I remember calling even Pam some days and just saying, I know I'm supposed to love thy neighbor, but I'm really I don't know what to do. Crying, I'm really just stressed about this, and I'm trying to want to love and be kind and help when I can, but at the same time, I don't know when, it's when the safety of my kids is a concern, and I have people, that are showing up at my door maybe by mistake, and not, they're supposed to be next door or looking for, one of their kids, and stressing on Trevor because I'm calling him at work to come home, but
I remember a conversation with Tim where we were walking our dogs and coming by, and he hollers to me and he says, hey, if you see my kids around here or something going on, just call the cops. And I turned around and I said, you take care of your house. You call the cops. I said, I'll take care of what's at my house. You take care of what's at your house. And I know that he and I have had that conversation. That was a good sticking point with him. Don't tell me to take care of what's going on over there, because that's your home. And that's, you need to take care of that.
Well, we had witnessed some stuff that was going on that was really concerning for well-being of individuals, and I actually decided to contact her because I was really concerned for her. And I think at that point she had moved out at that point of the house. She had moved out with her son, I think for safety reasons, but I, just kept in touch with her. I wanted her to know that we were concerned and we did care, for them. And I just, kept saying, I know if it's a financial thing, believe me, we are not perfect. And we had shared with them that we had had marriage troubles and that we had been to counseling with our church, and had mentioned you a few times and said, I'm just give it a chance. We have wonderful people at our church that can provide counseling, and of course would also make myself available. We did a little bit of training ourselves for the biblical counseling, and just letting her know there was somebody that cared, because I know she had shared with me that even at their prior church, nobody had reached out to them to let them know what was going. They knew, I guess, what was going on, but not really showing any concern for them. But anyways, just recommending that we had free counseling, even just for her sake, just to get help, to talk to somebody. And then I think it got to a point even where we were trying to find a way for her, I think even a place to stay at one point, because she wasn't sure where she was going to go with her son. So, and I reached out to some of the people at church, because I think we weren't even home at the time. I think we were in Maine, because it was a couple of years ago. I think we were back in Maine visiting family when some of that was going on.
So everything was getting more and more chaotic by the day, and Tim was getting deeper and deeper into use. And that day, the day that we left, he was in the front yard planting plants everywhere. Everywhere. I kid you not. And he was yelling the whole time at me, and the windows were open. And I remember Nico looked at me. He ran to the dump, and Nico looked at me and said, Mom, we need to go. We need to go now. He was 15. I was like, okay. So we did. Grabbed everything that we could, threw it in the back of the car, and left. I'm actually not even sure he noticed until the next day, now that I think about it. But I did let Erica know so she would know I was okay, and told her, and I also needed somebody to know where I was, so I let her know where we were. And my mom knew, and my friend Tracy knew where we were, but that was it.
And then at some point, you guys talked about counseling, and then you started to come.
Yes.
What happened with that?
I was adamant at first. And then Erica had messaged me the link and said she told them I would be calling and filling it out. I'm like, oh, gotta do it now. So I was like, okay. So, and I did, and I got in pretty quickly, which was wonderful. And I was scared because I'm so used to being judged, and I was so scared of that. And it's immediately, I think within 3 minutes, Rebecca was like, let's just talk. Tell me what's going on. And I did. And there was even a point in counseling where I was like, no, I don't want to get divorced. I'm not allowed and everything. And she pointed out, boom, 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 boom. Yes, you are. And then I realized that wasn't what I wanted. So that's when I think we took a turn in the counseling, because I think even you had that discussion with her. She needs to figure out what she wants.
What? So you were meeting with Rebecca for a little while. Mm-hmm. Really not even working on your marriage, but just working on yourself.
On me first, yes.
So what were some of the maybe sharp edges that needed to be rounded off a little bit? What were some of the things you guys were working on?
Fear, trust in God. That was big. Sorry. It lasted longer than I thought it would. And
at some point, now were you and Tim communicating with each other while you were gone?
Yes and no. I mean, I would answer his calls because he wouldn't stop calling. It wasn't good communication because he was still pretty messed up.
Was he demanding a lot of things of you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then at some point you said, I'm going to move back in the home.
Yes. So what happened there was it got to a point, it had been about 3 months, and it got to a point to where we needed to leave where we were because it was a bit cumbersome. I mean, Nick and I were sleeping on couches. So, and we had both dogs with us at the time and the cat. And I stayed with my friend Tracy for about a week because I had talked to Timmy, and he said he would clean up the house and he would go and make it so I could come home with the dogs and with Adrian and with Nicholas, because Adrian was with his dad and his other grandmother at that point. And he did. He did. He cleaned up the house so I could come home, and he went to the Salvation Army. And we told Timmy he had to leave because he was still living poorly as well.
And how long? And so he was Salvation Army. He was homeless.
Mm-hmm.
How long before you invited him back and give him one more chance? Of what did that look like?
I don't think it was that. It was just a couple of weeks. I don't even think it was that long because he was kind of scared. And I think part of that was because he was still kind of messed up, and there was stuff going through his head and all that kind of stuff. And he was afraid somebody was going to hurt him, and people were taking his things and all of that. And I couldn't sleep because I would worry about him. So I said, okay. I went and got him. There were a couple of times when I went and brought him food, or I brought him a jacket, or whatever the case may be, downtown. And then he came home, and I asked him to sleep on the couch. And I had never been private with him before, so it was really weird. Like, I would turn when I was taking a shower, I would shut the door. I never did that before. And so that was strange. But when he came back home, at that point, he had decided he was done. He was going to stop. So, and then COVID hit.
So Tim, drugs weren't a new thing for you, right? You've been doing drugs for a while now, or?
About 10 years old, started smoking pot. And probably doing acid 12, and then PCP and coke, speed, mescaline. Just throughout my whole high school years, all the way up to going into the Army. Heavy into drugs. Got in a lot of trouble. Went into the Army for 3 years because of trouble. Got out of the service. Still using drugs. Got married to a girl that was using drugs. Had 2 kids, Ashley and Timmy. Let me see, 2 and 3, I guess. About 2 and 3. They turned 2 and 3, and I had quit using drugs at that point, and I got tired of my wife using drugs. She was doing coke and all kinds of other stuff, and doctor shopping, and it got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore, so I brought her to court and sued her for custody, and ended up winning custody of the kids. So I was totally disabled through Social Security, so I'm up in New York, and decided my mom lived down here, I'd take my 2 kids, come to live in Florida. So I moved down to Florida here. And the drugs and the alcohol and all of it was still very fresh in my life. So I came down, I was here for probably, let me see, 10, 12 years. Left, went back to New York City. Came back with this is it, after I had the kids.
Right.
After I had the kids, I got injured on a job in New York, had 800 pounds of sheetrock crushing me. A-frame flipped over. Then I ended up getting hooked on Oxycontins. I was taking 160 milligrams in the morning and 80 milligrams at night, and 20 and 30 quick releases throughout the day for 5 years. So I was pretty much a walking zombie. So when I moved down here, I met Christine, and we ended up getting engaged, and we ended up getting married, and I still had drug problems and things, so we moved here, and it got 10 times worse. So for 19 years of my marriage, I'm out using drugs, partying with people, not taking any responsibility for being a parent or a father. And it just, my wife, she got sick and tired of it, and she told me one day, she said, I can't do this anymore, I'm gonna leave. So I said, well, go ahead and leave. Well, she got in the car and took nickels, and boom, she was gone. So about a month went by, I'm shooting dope, I'm using fentanyl, I'm using coke, speed. I just want to die, I don't care. Now, I talked to her before Christmas, and I went to breakfast with her, and I asked her to come back. I said, I want you to have the house. She goes, well, if I come back, you have to go. I said, fine, if that's what I gotta do, I'll do. So she came back, and I left. And so I went out and lived on the street for probably a month and a half, 2 months, I don't know. Under bridges, pouring rain, the worst conditions. You talk about life stinking. I had no belief in anything. I didn't believe in myself. I believed in drugs. Those are the things that are gonna give me all my answers. Came around, and Christine, I was at the Salvation Army, and I called her up. I said, would you please come and get me? She's like, well, I don't think I can do this. So I said, please, I promise you, I will change, I'll quit using drugs, I'll do everything you want me to do. Whatever you say, I'll do. She goes, okay, there's no in my bedroom, none of this, none of that. And I said, whatever I gotta do. I'm not gonna throw away 20 years of marriage. During this process though, I'm using drugs, and Trevor and Erica, who are my neighbors, they were constantly trying to help me, constantly trying to direct me in the right direction. Like I had gone over to Trevor's one night, Timmy was causing problems, we were fighting, and I went over and said, Trevor, please call the police, please call the police. Trevor looked at me and said, Tim, I'm sorry, this is your home. You're the man of that house, you call the police. And I was mad as hell at him. because I knew it was going to escalate to a fight between me and my son, but that wasn't it. It was what he had said to me resonated in my head from that day about being a man and standing up and doing what I needed to do to take over my house. And they're telling me about this church and God, and I'm like, yeah, right, God, whatever. So finally, Christine, I said to her, I said, who's this guy, Pastor Mike? And she goes, well, that's the church I go to. Can I come? No.
I said no.
I said, okay.
I did. Isn't that horrible?
Is there any way that I could, somehow get together with this church? And at that point, Zoom hit. So that first Sunday.
Yeah, YouTube. It's on
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah. So COVID was good for us.
And
it was easy to bring them to church in the kitchen.
So she said to me, okay, 10 o'clock, let's come on in here. So I have never sat and listened to a sermon from the start to the finish in my entire life. I sat down and I never moved. I listened to this guy preach, Pastor Mike, directly to me. Everything that was happening, he was telling me, there's an answer for that. There's an answer for this. There's an answer for that. God, 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 God. And it was just like, boom, this huge light went on in my head. I was like, man, is this it? Just put God first and it's going to be, this is how it's going to be. It's not going to be easy, but it sure isn't going to be like it was. A mess, not knowing what was going to happen next. My family, my wife, my kids. I didn't know if I was ever going to see them. So.
Yeah, and I don't remember where in Romans we were that day, and I wish I would have marked it, but it had something to do with caring for your neighbors. And I think I texted you. I was like, did you hear that? And I mean, I'm sitting in the kitchen in tears. And I'm like, okay, that was all God's timing. Just stop. You're making me cry words. That was all God's timing. So, and I think it was shortly after that was when we started counseling together.
Yeah, that was great.
Hard.
That was great.
That was hard.
That was really great.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, I was able to reach into myself because of the teaching Rebecca, Pastor Mike, and the way he teaches you. It's like he builds your story and gives you the tools to work with and how to work through that problem and how to work with this problem. It all has to do with Jesus Christ. Me, God. God first, me, my wife, of course. And if I put him in front of everything, I mean, I've got a year, almost 2 years now, clean and sober. I have never in my life felt better. I've never had friends people that I could actually call a friend and trust, knowing that you go through things and so many people tell you that they'll be there for you. And total strangers that I really don't even know are coming over to me, opening their hearts up when I'm treating them like trash, still showing me the love of God. And that alone, I mean, if that doesn't change your heart, there's got to be something wrong with you. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Now, what are the biggest differences that you guys have seen in your marriage as a result of kind of both you guys being saved and growing?
I think recovery time when we're fighting, because we still fight. We still argue. We're two different people. We disagree. But I think the recovery time is much better. I think we learned a lot. The tools that we learned in counseling, and I think also just staying in the Word. If your heart's full of the Word of God, you don't have a whole lot of room for nonsense. And I do notice a difference when we're not studying. It gets worse. So it's like, I guess I need to pick up that book again.
And that's the greatest thing about it, Jose, is that I know when I'm not in the Word, because everything starts going wacko.
The whole house knows.
Everything just goes
Just
out of
trickles
control,
down.
just boop, within minutes. Now I'm just like, boom, I sit on the bed, I tell Chris, look, I gotta get into the Word. She's like, go right ahead. And I read out loud. So she'll be in doing stuff with the real estate. I'll be inside reading out loud. Like I do my prayers for my wife, and I'll do Romans, or I'll just read something, but I'll read it out loud. And then as I'm reading it, I'll say, oh, would you catch that? So that's where that came in. And therefore, okay, now I got that. And the two of us, and we're back and forth, and she goes, could you come out here instead of yelling from the bedroom all the time? Drives her crazy. But it's so incredible. I mean, our church, the people, unique. I mean, I've been to many churches. I've been all over, Baptist, you name it. I've been at different services, but Community Bible Church, that the church itself, the people are incredible. I just feel, when I walk in there, I feel I'm home, and the love that resonates from everybody in there is just amazing. You can't find it anywhere. I found it at Community Bible Church though, so every Sunday.
You know what's
Like
incredible to
clockwork.
me is I can look around church, and I remember when Eric and Trevor distanced themselves from us, and they told us they had talked to the elders. And I remember walking with me, when it was just me, it wasn't so much. But when Timmy was with me, I remember walking around and thinking, all of these people know like little bits and pieces, but of the worst of our story. And no one has looked at my husband sideways. I didn't care how anybody looked at me, but I care how people look at him. And not one person has ever made either one of us feel judged. Knowing the chaos.
The
And
insanity.
that, to me, that's incredible. You know, that's truly, truly the love of God. You know, because you can't love somebody like that without having that agape love. You just can't.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Trevor and Erica, my neighbors, we're still neighbors, and we
We're still
talk more now than we ever did. And it's so true, like it says in the Bible, love your neighbor like you love yourself. Now I see why. Because it's all about kindness. It's all about giving that love to somebody that doesn't ask for it. Just to be able to go out and love on people and sincerely care about them unconditionally.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Anything in return.
It's amazing.
You know, at Community Bible Church, one of the things that we've always kind of said is we recognize that there are going to be people in our community that are suffering. We can't really do anything about the fact that they're going to suffer, but we can say this, that they don't have to suffer alone. And I think what you've seen in this video is everyone suffered in some way or another, and yet there was one simple act of faith, one simple invitation to church, whether that was inviting your dad to church or inviting a friend or a neighbor to counseling. Everything was a little bit easy to do, and I think we often think it's so profound that we've got to have these great words and answer all the questions and do backflips just to be able to invite somebody to church or to love on somebody. When in reality, it's just a simple message that I love you enough to invite you. And so thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It sure meant a lot to us, and it's really neat to see how God puts together this forest of faith for His glory and for our good.